USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We're live first Mondays of every month. My name is Andre. I'm with USA EBN, and I'm joined on the Zeta Report by Nancy Leader from ZetaTalk.com. Nancy, how are you?
I'm here and eager to share something that I've looked up and checked. You know, we have people buying seed and learning how to save seed and doing a little planting here and there in their windowsills or whatever, and maybe buying some baby chicks. Maybe somebody in the neighborhood's got baby chicks and all. We know that's stepping up and people are paying attention because the seed sellers say they've run out of stock to sell, and the hatcheries say we don't have any more baby chicks to send out. So people are paying attention and trying their hands. Now what? Now we move on to the next step. How do you plan for self-sufficiency for your family or for your neighborhood? You know, how much space do you need? How should you go about it, etc.? How many livestock should you plan on maintaining in your backyard, perhaps? That's what today's show is all about, the 1 Acre Farm. Before we leap into that, let me just read our standard disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of having a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes, and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. The 1 Acre Farm. How difficult might it be to truly be self-sustaining, able to feed your family from your own backyard? The good news is that it does not require a farm, and not that much land either. If you have a big backyard, you can join with a few neighbors to create that big backyard you are already there. An acre equates to a football field, or in terms of feet, it is 209 by 209 foot square. For those who have been trying their hand at gardening and have been thinking about ordering a box of newly hatched chicks, this is the next step. Quoting morningchores.com. The rewarding and healthful lifestyle of small-scale farming can be yours on as little as 1 acre of land. The key to success is not size. Your 1 acre farm will flourish. We live on 2 acres and have an orchard, a large garden, berry patches, grapevines, an herb garden, and livestock. We haven't even come close to utilizing all of our land yet. Well, that sounds promising. Let's say you have inherited a parking lot, lots of blacktop and concrete, no soil. Not to despair, there is container gardening or raised beds to the rescue. This would require trucking in some soil at the start and good composting with earthworms to convert your compost to nitrogen-rich soil. Of course, the ability to water the beds with a hose. Lest you dread the thought of having to construct containers or raised beds from lumber and concrete, your solution is right at hand in the recycling bins. Plastic containers of all types can be filled with soil, given a drainage hole at the bottom, and voila, you have your garden row. Container gardening is also ideal for those in the city who only have a porch or some stairs. Growing power is an example. Quoting small footprint. Growing Power in Detroit is one of the most famous examples of urban permaculture in the U.S. and produces 87,000 pounds of food per year, including fish, honey, eggs, and milk, on less than 2 acres in the heart of Detroit. Man, if they can do it, guys, you can do it. I mean, the recipe is right there. Read up on it. This guy was down to earth, there in the slums, working with nothing but common sense. Growing Power was born in Milwaukee in 1993, and the operation is still going strong. Quoting UWM in 2019, inside one of the greenhouses is a tank teeming with 1,400 perch, raising fish early on tilapia, and more recently lake perch in closed-loop systems is one of Growing Power's success stories. Water circulates, carrying fish waste to fertilize plants, which in turn clean the water. End of the quote. That's a standard aquaponics approach. The fish water is recycled with the hydroponic water and back and forth, and it's a wonderful synergy. Let's say you have a small yard, a front yard only 1/4 of an acre, but combined with the back porch on the second level, ample space for the vegetables. Rooftops, cascading racks for strawberries, and tomato vines, no space should go to waste. By partnering with some neighbors who have room for chickens and fruit trees and a berry patch, you might find you have ample space. Remember, that 1-acre family farm is assuming you have fruit trees, berry bushes, some livestock such as goats grazing, as well as a vegetable garden. A modest yard will give you enough space for the veggies. Free-ranging chickens don't need a lot of space. If you are getting your eggs and milk from a neighbor, a modest yard will suffice. How much of your acre should you reserve for your vegetable garden? There is plenty of advice offered on the internet for a family of 4, but the space requirements vary depending upon whether one just wants fresh veggies during the summer or wants to preserve for the winter too. The estimate also changes if one is a vegetarian. Assume 1/3 of your acre for year-round vegetables. On the low side, quoting morningchores.com, as a general rule of thumb, you need anywhere from 100 to 200 square feet of growing space per person you intend on feeding. End of the quote. Well, let's say what Best Pick Reports has to say. Generally speaking, 200 square feet of garden space per person in your family will allow for a harvest that feeds everyone year-round. Well, that's pretty close. But if planning to preserve for the winter a year-round harvest, the plot goes up to about 1,000 square feet per person. Quoting newlifeonahomestead.com. How much space do you need to garden to feed your family of 4? In general, to grow all the food you need, expect to need between 4,000 and 6,000 square feet. That's for a family of 4. And if a vegetarian, the plot size goes way up, quadrupling. Quoting growingveg.com. Research in the 1970s by John somebody or other of the Ecology Action Organization found that 4,000 square feet of growing space was enough land to sustain one person on a vegetarian diet for a year. Well, that's a heck of a lot different than 100, square feet, 4,000 square feet. Wow. Well, the tiny house fad that has emerged the past few years fits in well with the 1-acre family farm. Tiny houses can be purchased or can be an RV. If there are catastrophes such as earthquake-devastated cities or flood-ravaged coastlines, setting up in the country on a free acre provided by the government might be an ideal setting for a self-sufficient family farm, as well as a new house. Remember the trailers FEMA provided to refugees after Katrina? They were tiny houses, but sufficed. Quoting USA Today, at its peak, there were more than 45,000 temporary housing units provided to disaster survivors in Mississippi. You know, I keep thinking that 1 acre per family with some sort of a little house like that, wouldn't that be what they would have to do after the new Madrid ripped and devastated city after city up the Mississippi and under the Seaway and along the East Coast? And oh dear, what do we do with all these people? You can't just park them out in the Kansas, fields. You have to give them something to live in. But then here comes the plow, and here are the seeds, and here we go. And by the way, that's your box of chickens. Chickens can live on the edge of a garden. If they are free-ranging, they will go along your rows of veggies and among the berry bushes and find the bugs. They scratch the surface, so aerate the soil. Roosters are very chivalrous, and if they find an anthill or grubs, they will cluck to the hens who come running to gobble them up, cluck, 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 and it's just adorable to watch. They don't eat. They don't eat it all up. They stand there and like guardsmen looking about to make sure that the chicken hawks don't swoop down and get their hens. While the hens go gobble gobble gobble. Chickens need a coop or hut for the night, preferably where they can roost on a rack. In nature, they roost high above the ground because their claws lock around a branch when they sleep. When you first get the chickens, you should keep them in their coop for 2 days, so they think of this as home and will return at dusk automatically. Chickens need some sunlight daily, else their bones go soft from lack of vitamin D. A coop should have enough space that if you need to keep the chickens in the coop, they can get sunlight and stretch their legs. Ideally, the coop should allow their keeper to go in or reach in for the eggs, which are laid daily in the nest. Chickens are not picky eaters and can be fed melon rinds for a treat and will consume the whole thing. I can attest to that. Give them this kind of stuff and they will just eat everything. If there is a sickly chicken in the flock and the others may cannibalize it, they are, after all, little dinosaurs. Chicken poop is very rich fertilizer, so much be aged before it is used in the garden or it will burn the plants. I know this for a fact because I tried to give my chicken poop to a nearby gardener who had perennials. He said, "Oh, I can't use that." I said, "What?" And he said, "Because it'll burn, you have to let it age for, at least a year." If you have a rooster, you will get fertilized eggs, and come spring, you will have one or more of your hens wanting to be a brooder. Often there will be one very natural maternal hen doing the brooding for all of the others. This fact. They will lay over a dozen eggs in the same nest for the brooder to keep warm. Well, thank you very much. I'm just going to go out and run around and have a good time. You warm and raise my chickens. The brooder will pluck out her belly feathers so the eggs can get maximum strength. She will turn the eggs on all sides so that they keep warm throughout. She will rotate them within the pile. A brooder should be provided with food and water during this time. A brooder will teach the hatchlings to drink water and peck at seed. Let me tell you, if you get a box of chicks, you have to take their little beaks and stick it in water because they don't have mama to teach them how to do that. The egg hatches, they ship. And they'll sit there next to a bowl of water and not drink. You have to be mama for your box of chicks when it comes. If you lack a brooder or if you decide to hatch chicks yourself, you will need a hatching box, usually warmed by a lamp. Turn and rotate the eggs yourself. Fertilized eggs can be identified by what is called candling, holding the egg up to a light to see if the cloudy fertilized embryo can be seen. If not, you'll never get a baby chick out of that egg. Goats are recommended because they give milk and thus cheese, and they can also be eaten for meat the same way dairy cows can be eaten for meat. Goats are not picky about what they eat and browse everything. Thus one could give them the green compost from the garden as well as hay. Like sheep, they will keep the yard mowed. I have never kept goats, but have talked to herdsmen who tell me that goats bond with their herder and will follow the herdsperson rather than having to be chased and corralled. They also poop in pellets, so their manure is easy to collect and distribute in the garden. The one problem with goats is that they are jumpers and thus escape artists. I have been told by someone who keeps goats in Idaho that he had like 15-foot-high fences in order to keep his goats in the pen. They would hop on top of their little shed and go boing right across the top of the fence, and off they'd go with anything less than 15 feet. So be forewarned. An alternative to keeping a goat is keeping a sheep for milk and cheese, and of course, lamb chops. They also provide wool for felt production or to be spun into yarn for knitting or weaving. How much space will a goat or ewe take from your 1-acre plot? About 1/3 acre for a pygmy goat. Quoting rossfarm.com. Usually 1 acre of pasture is suitable enough for keeping 3 to 4 pygmies in fine condition. For sheep, a similar amount of space for pasture land. Quoting PurdueEdu.edu, the forage needs of 100 ewe flock on 30 acres. There's that 1/3 again. Quoting WikiHow, a rough rule of thumb is 5 ewes per acre. Fruit trees and berry bushes take up an inordinate amount of space for their produce. Quoting gardeningknowhow.com, trees must be spaced so that they will get plenty of sun and allow for air circulation to prevent fungal issues. Standard fruit trees grow at maturity up to 18 to 25 feet, tall and wide. Semi-dwarf-sized fruit trees reach 12 to 15 feet in height and width. Dwarf fruit trees grow to about 8 to 10 feet tall and wide. Consider growing fruit trees in the tree banks around the street. Otherwise it goes to waste, especially after a catastrophe when nobody's driving anywhere, etc., and the highways are ripped up and down and food distribution just isn't happening. Why not? Tree banks, there they sit. Or along the roadways, which might otherwise be cluttered with weeds or tall grass that require mowing. The trees will grab the sunlight and water, crowding out the weeds. Fruit trees must be planted some years before they will be productive, however. So you should be doing that now, somewhere. If berry bushes are a space hog, the strawberry is a boon. It can be grown in a vertical cascade of plots, saving garden space. You can even take a portable cascade indoors for the winter, as strawberries will grow and produce 24 hours a day, year-round. It's the only plant I know that does that. And who can argue with strawberries? Many veggies are climbers, and if tied to a fence or a trellis, will go up into the sunshine, making their fruits easier to pick and taking less space on the ground. This also keeps the slugs and bugs off the fruit. Cucurbits will happily go up instead of spreading around on the ground, and these include butternut squash, cucumbers, and zucchini and summer squash, and there they are hanging, and they don't fall to the ground, they just make picking easy. Take far less space. Pole beans are by nature climbers, and giving them a fence or trellis makes it easy to pick the long beans. Tomatoes love the sun when tied to a fence or trellis and are easier to test for ripeness and pick when high off the ground. Tomato vines need to be tied up, but a soft strip of cloth works well for this and is reusable. What I did when I was growing seed from tomatoes and shipping it out to people, I cut up the plastic garbage bags that we get into long strips, and I used those as ties. Otherwise, you just have to recycle those bags. It worked really well. It was soft, didn't rip the tomato vines up at all, and you just snip them off when you have to take it down. Don't put it in the compost. I don't think it's edible. I don't think it. Maybe after 100 years it dissolves into something edible. Okay. Pumpkin patch. Pumpkins have huge leaves and spread out, as do other winter squash such as acorn squash, but the leaves and skins are edible and can be fed to the goats or even as a treat to chickens. Given some garden space, the pumpkin patch will deliver. Store pumpkins in a cool space and enjoy pumpkin pie or roasted pumpkins all winter. So I'm hoping you guys set out, compute your garden space, make your plans, confiscate the roadsides, confiscate the tree banks. You have to get a little cooperation from your village or township, to do that, because they say, why aren't you mowing the grass on your tree bank? And we say, well, I'm growing fruit and nut trees. Same thing with free-ranging chickens. The stopper to that is frequently the village statutes here. No, you can't have chickens running around the village, which is like, and I hear that people have that in their suburbs, but some places manage. So see if you can get a rule change and have chickens and fruit and nut trees planted along the village tree banks. So Andre and I wanted to talk a little bit about the New Madrid, because I have some things that have emerged over the last month or so. One of them is hotspots. Now, by this we mean there are various ways to measure what's going on. Emissions, CO, carbon monoxide, showing, if there's a stress point and the ground is ripping. Sulfur dioxide, which runs along the Ohio River and emits from that, recently found in St. Louis. And microwaves that show up that indicate stress and ripping rock. This is electronic screech type of stuff. Different emissions, different electromagnetic particle flows, etc. And here's what has happened this last month. Microwave hotspots and arcing have been noted by, I'm going to mispronounce this poor guy's name, Dutch Cincy, who blogs on the internet. These hotspots pepper the soft rock leading up to the town of New Madrid. Boop, 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 boop. And then why just that area? In the whole United States, why just that area? And then arcing from the town of New Madrid across states that border the Mississippi. These arcs went from Montana to Wisconsin, Idaho, up down to New Madrid, and they were arcing around. But in every case, these arcs crossed the Mississippi. I was surprised to see Wisconsin in at least two of those arcs. So what this means is, and it came up before, from the San Andreas over to Idaho, which had a quick swarm, and all of a sudden, there's this arc recorded, and people say, what's that? That must be a dew, that energy weapon, etc. But it's not, because it's at an angle. And arcing would, of course, record as electromagnetic something or other up there. And it's all the tension will cause arcing. Okay, quoting Zeta talk on this. Hotspots that are not emitting heat but microwaves which register on radar and is in the electromagnetic spectrum and thus participates in the electronic screech that rock under compression tension exhibits. What are we talking about? Electronic screech. This is something the Zetas have been saying for years and years. That when you squeeze rock, you press out the little air bubbles, and thus electrons can pass through the rocks without encountering insulation, because air bubbles are insulation. So squeeze the rock, here comes the electricity. It is a fact that at the epicenter of an earthquake, you will get a lot of static on your AM/FM radio. And you say, what's that? Why can't I bring that radio station in? You better watch out, because here comes the quake. And I can confirm this when I moved to California, and right after the Loma Prieta earthquake, and I talked to people who said that. Yes, they went by Santa Cruz in the day before, and they couldn't get the radio station to come in. Okay, another video by Dutch Cincy maps sulfur dioxide in the U.S., showing an intense release at St. Louis, Missouri. Sulphur Springs, Missouri, of course, is just south of St. Louis. So there are breaks in the rock at that location, a very weak location. A thin crust, as the Zetas like to say. But as of last month, many residents of St. Louis and along the Ohio River were complaining of a strong sulfur smell, diabolical, like the gates of hell have opened, that type of thing. This is not unusual for the Ohio River, apparently, as older charts show the Ohio River emits sulfur dioxide aplenty. But now there were reports of this stink in Ohio and Indiana. I mean, not just from the maps, along the Ohio River, but people would say, I came home at 2 o'clock in the morning and phew. Is this cause for alarm? In the opinion of, and quoting the Zetas, Sulphur Springs, Missouri lies just south of St. Louis, so it should not be a surprise that a sulfur smell has emerged in the area. This region is the juncture of several major rivers, the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Illinois, and the Ohio, and thus has thin crust easily pulled apart. And if you feel yourself, sort of like on a trampoline as you walk around in St. Louis, joingy, the crust is probably being pulled apart. New Madrid, here we come. Is there a reason for the annual Global Thunder exercises with B-52 bombers is taking place over the New Madrid region this year? The B-52s are housed in Louisiana, North Dakota, Missouri, Wyoming, and Montana, with headquarters in Nebraska. They are not housed in the New Madrid region at all. But here we are, back and forth across. But per the Stratus Fortress tracker on October 22nd, they were all over the Ozarks and south of Memphis and into Tennessee, back and forth, right there by New Madrid. The Stratofortress has superior surveillance equipment for infrared radar and other electronic optics, such as microwave. Are they checking for the electronic screech? Well, that'd be my guess. And indeed, in addition to the sulfur dioxide emissions detected at St. Louis and the microwave hotspots, we now have CO, carbon monoxide emissions, again, where the Ramapo fault line ends in Pennsylvania. The carbon monoxide is also showing up along the San Andreas and stress points inland, like the Continental Divide over Colorado and at the Tennessee-Alabama border. So the whole United States is being stressed horribly. And it's at the snapping point. There is no question. Just when it snaps, I don't know. But it certainly is making the U.S. government nervous with the B-52s sent out that way. Of course, they don't say that. They don't say we're nervous about the New Madrid. They just say, oh, no. So, Andrea, what do you think? I wanted to latch into my final statements this hour and talk about how Nibiru is making itself obvious these days in so many ways that cannot be denied, even if the common man has no special cameras or no special filters or doesn't even notice, exactly where the sun is supposed to come up or set. So what do you think? How are we doing on the New Madrid?
Well, I think, first, we talked about this on the last episode as well, like those hotspots are pretty telling about where they are and how it lines up with the fault line. And the underreporting from USGS is expected. It's hard to get a good feel of magnitude and frequency of a lot of the stuff that's actually posted and then deleted on USGS, and that's been noted here before. So, do your own research on that one. It's like, you got to keep an eye on things. If you're in that area, you should know, just like if you're on the San Andreas fault, if you're in the New Madrid area, then you should understand that there's a possibility, an extreme possibility, that you could be on a place that's going to be moving sideways or ripping or going up, because it's done it before.
And nobody has done quick retrofitting in those cities up along the Mississippi. The last one was 18 something other, the big New Madrid rip and etc. But everybody says, oh no, unless you're on the San Andreas or living in Japan, you don't have to worry about earthquakes. And up go the brick buildings, which are the first ones to come down, and et cetera. And according to the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas, this New Madrid rip, when it really starts to unzip and it really starts going, is going to tear all the bridges across the Mississippi. The problem with that is a lot of distribution goes across these Mississippi bridges. They have gas and oil from the refineries or not, that go across and big pipes that go under these bridges on their way to the East Coast. So what happens when they rip? Well, you have a big fire, a flaming Mississippi, but you don't get a lot of gas for the cars or oil for the heating oil on the East Coast. You'll have to resort to boats. I mean, it'll be a complete disaster for distribution of oil and gas. But that's not the end of it. All these cities, starting from Memphis and on up, even Chicago will have problems, according to the Zetas. That is because the New Madrid runs up close to Chicago and then makes a sharp right turn and goes under the seaway through Cleveland and along those cities that are just under the seaway all the way up into the New England states. And these cities can expect things to come crashing down. Well, now you have FEMA having to worry about how many cities. Woo! And in Chicago, they have tunnels that were built a century ago or more, canals to run water through to the Mississippi.
And livestock. They ran livestock in those tunnels too.
Yeah, and then they stopped using them. That's right. And then they stopped using them. But there they sit. They don't go and fill them in and say, let's put some concrete in here or anything like that. So what happens when you start ripping Chicago open underneath the infrastructure under all the tall buildings? Here comes the Lake Michigan water flowing down into these canals and with no stop gates at all and flowing through. So water tends to gouge. Whatever it flows through, it scours, I think that's the word, and carries stuff up. So we're going to have a mess in Chicago under the buildings. We're going to have water washing things away. And so FEMA is going to be extremely busy. I would imagine that martial law, at a minimum, will have to be called in order to deal with how do you move people, where do you put them, how do you prevent looting. We have looting and rioting now going on in places like Chicago or St. Louis or, I don't want to say it, under certain management of certain political parties, but it's defund the police, and so here we go. The military will have to step in, and we have no choice. That's what I think. I think that is coming. So I wanted to touch.
Nancy, we've talked. I just wanted to mention here. We've talked about this before. The New Madrid and the sequence of events, as according to the Zetas, the 7 of 10 plate movement sequence. There's the San Andreas, the New Madrid, the Atlantic Fault, and a lot of things have to sort of happen in sequence. So my question to you is, and can you review for our viewers and listeners, what's the precursor for the New Madrid? What is the piece of the puzzle, the keystone that has to move on the plates before the shift or the rip can happen in the United States?
Yeah, the sequence of events, right. They have stated, and they have pointed out, the Zetas have pointed out that the North America plate is a flat top. It has a straight line from over there in North Japan through the Middle East, through the Atlantic, through the Arctic over to Iceland and Greenland. And as a consequence of that, having a flat top, it can't roll. It's stuck. All it can do is the pressure of an expanding Atlantic and a compressing Pacific results in what they call a bow tension, where the tip of Mexico is pulled westward, and it's trying to, and the Aleutian Islands and the tip of Mexico are the tips of the bow, and it goes. So this can only be relieved by this diagonal rip up along the New Madrid, in which the northeast part of the eastern part of the United States goes up toward the northeast, and the western part goes southwest. So there was that diagonal pull. So we're in that state right now where the tension is excruciating, right? So when that goes, I don't know. The Zetas may know, but they're not allowed to say. Okay. Once that happens, we've had and it's the tip of Mexico that we should be watching when we have really big quakes down there at the tip of Mexico. That means that it is about to start to move, and we have them galore up there in the Aleutians, and we do have a lot down where the Caribbean plate smashes Central America. But they said watch the tip of Mexico for those big quakes. So that's the best they can do because they're not allowed to tell us just the sequence of events. Now, once the New Madrid adjustment happens, then we're going to have the San Andreas free to move, and it will. Now that means that here goes L.A. and and all those earthquakes up the San Andreas up there. Not the earthquakes, all those volcanoes up there, in Washington, Oregon, etc., Mount St. Helens, etc. So that's the sequence of events, So we're just waiting and under tension. It's terrible. It's like having perpetual PMS. Can something please happen? So in my last moment here...
I 50% of our viewers know what you're talking about on that one. Well, actually, all of them do, because the other half experience it. So, okay, yes, I'll move on.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no escaping PMS. Okay.
No.
One of the predictions that the Zetas made was, they've pointed out that in 2003, when Nibiru came into the inner solar system, that Bush went around, he gathered all the heads of state in France that fall, and you could see by their faces as they came out of that meeting, and said, Nibiru is real, it came into our inner solar system, and we'll let you know when, but right now, panic is the worst thing we have to worry about. Don't say anything. We'll bribe you, we'll threaten you, but don't say anything. And they complied. So the Zeta said they got periodic updates from the U.S. administration. Here's where Nibiru is. We're tracking its trajectory, yada, yada, yada. So recently they have told these heads of state that they thought by January of 2021 it would be undeniable. Nibiru would be undeniable, either because it could be seen in the sky, because the wobble was so obvious, etc. So here I wanted to talk a little bit about what the common man can see, naked eye, and is it not getting close to January of 2021? After Nibiru entered the inner solar system in 2003, brilliant second sun sightings were seen at dawn and dusk. Light in the red spectrum bends to the curvature of the Earth, making the sun huge and allowing light from Nibiru to be seen naked eye. Just this past month, we have had photos from the public showing a brilliant date and time-stamped second sun from Australia on October 15th, with objects on the right including a monster persona of Nibiru and its moons, with illuminated magnetic field lines. A photo capture from Texas on October 4th also shows a monster on the right at sunrise. These are naked eye sights captured on film. What is a monster persona? Quoting Zeta Talk. The monster sun is light that has moved in all directions, bent back toward the Earth by a gravity trap it represents from a broad area, so that when it arrives at the viewer, it represents a broad, big orb. And these are things that are seen naked eye. People took these photos because they saw that in the sky. Second sun rising and setting, it's pretty unmistakable. When they say, what is that? And they're just dismissed, by astronomers or whatever. Oh, you saw a sundog. You don't know what you're talking about. But sundogs are distinct, and this is not what they were seeing. Manifestation of Nibiru's greasy tail shows up too, naked eye, as in a photo from California on September 30th showing a smearing rainbow. Smoking petrol bubbles have been seen drifting down through the clouds since Nibiru, the magnetic monster, arrived in the inner solar system and is wafting its charged tail past the Earth. Magnetic swirls have appeared and can also be seen naked eye. Remember the blue swirl in Norway in 2009 that grounded? It was claimed to be a missile track, but what's the excuse for this photo from South Africa in September? Now, let me tell you, the petrol bubbles, they're showing up as a suddenly bright sky, no lightning, no explosion, just what was that light? Or you can see them during the day. Wait, what's that thing in the sky? It's a bright ball, and now it's a smoke trail going down toward the ground. We're going to see a lot more of this petrol stuff because the petrol is captured in the tail of Nibiru from the asteroid belt when there used to be life-bearing planets there. They were water planets, fish and all that, organic compounds. So when they got all smashed to pieces, that's where we got our long-period comets from, the water in those water-bearing planets coming swooshing through. Our comets are water and also oil and petrols, because those are the organic compounds. So it's going to get quite interesting. Then there are the naked eye captures of Nibiru itself or its brilliant moon swirls, which can appear below or above the sun or on either side. Recent captures from Sweden on August 13th shows a moon swirl on the left. Another from Goiás, Brazil on September 14th, showing Nibiru eclipsing the sun from above. Brazil is below the equator in the southern hemisphere, and from their view, Nibiru is not at 7 o'clock, but above at the 1 o'clock position, upside down. Their view is upside down. Quoting Zeta Talk, as is known, the view of the sun in the northern hemisphere and what lies either to the right or left of the sun is reversed in the southern hemisphere. So these are where you just see, once again, they say, what is that odd look of the sun? And they take a picture, and you can't deny that there's something there. Then there are the plethora of photos using filters, such as orange mylar, or filters that selectively allow light in the red spectrum to dominate, or green welder's lens that reduce the glare of the sun. The Nibiru complex is there, not only visible, naked eye, but also by the daily Earth wobble, which has the sun rising and setting in the wrong place. What causes the daily Earth wobble? This is Nibiru pushing and pulling on the Earth's poles. Nibiru is a big magnetic bully, 23 times as massive as the Earth. The wobble was predicted in 2004 by the Zetas. The sun is not rising nor setting where it ought, and this can be measured and compared against the official times and location expected. This is officially measured and published by the Earth Orientation Center. This can also be seen on world temperature maps as this or that part of the globe gets more or less sunlight. And let me tell you, a lot of people, especially if they live in cities, don't walk around saying, is that the right azimuth for the sun at 6:53 a.m.? But we have people who do this. We have a woman in Wisconsin, Andre, Miss Sakamaki, who does that regularly. Out at dawn and sun, and she puts it on a graph, and you can see it's not where it's supposed to be if you don't want to go out in the cold yourself. So it's getting close. The visibility and undeniability is getting close. The wobble is getting worse. The weather is getting worse. Now these are we can look to Europe and say, why are they locking down that fiercely? It's practically, it seems like martial law. Nobody can leave their home, in Spain and France and the Netherlands and the UK and troops are swirling around, seen on the roads and the like. Now, what are they so worried about? And you get the insider information from the hospital. They do not have massive people in their hospitals. It's bull roar, that this is another COVID outbreak. What are they worried about? Two things. One, according to Zeta, say they are in part worried that if Nibiru gets admitted, everyone's going to say, oh, how are you going to take care of us? And nobody in Europe, the elite in Europe, haven't even bothered to think about it. We may have Kansas and Nebraska and FEMA here, and Russia has the Far East, and even India is invited to the Far East, and China has their ghost cities and other places. You know, they have recourse, they have high ground, or they're not worried. But in Europe, where they've lied through their teeth for how long, they don't have a way of taking care of their people. That, and also the new Madrid, once it rips, the prediction by the Zetas is there'll be a tsunami racing toward Europe, 200 to 300 feet, hitting all those countries like France and Spain and the UK and the Netherlands, who are locking their citizens down. They are afraid of rioting. You know, I don't know isn't it better to have people rioting and running up to the high ground, or do you lock them in their house and say, no, you have to have a COVID mask first before you can run for high ground? It's not clear to me, but it doesn't sound like they have very good government over there.
That's why you should always be prepared yourself and do your own research. Check out ZetaTalk.com and the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader, as well as USAEBN.org. How about that for a plug?
Yeah. And remember, start gardening, think about baby chicks, plan your lot, talk to your neighbors, get your village statutes changed so you can have goats going up and down the street, and that's the way to go.